Well, welcome in now, Brady Quinn, to the 24/7 Sports Social Distance Series. And Brady, excited to talk to you. You're sort of the perfect 24/7 Sports interview subject because you're a five-star recruit coming out of high school. You're an iconic Notre Dame quarterback, first-round NFL draft pick. Now you're one of the top voices out there in the college football and NFL space. So I'm going to kind of saddle you up here if you're good with it and kind of run the gamut on these questions. But first, how's it going? I mean, you're like me, girl, dad, couple young kids at home. You getting through this thing?
Yeah, we're getting through this thing. I think the toughest thing for us right now is we've got 3 under 4, and we've got a newborn. So she's 8 weeks now. She's not quite sleeping through the night. So when you combine lack of sleep with quarantining and not really being able to go out and do much, the routine can get monotonous. You can start to get a little bit crazy. So my wife is really the true champ, being able to handle a lot of that, at least with our newborn, considering there's not a whole lot I can do. But with the older two, I'm just trying to keep them active and busy, man. But I'm sure like you, like everyone else right now, those are good problems to have. Like if that's what you're concerned or complaining about, those are good problems to have. I do have to say one thing, though. Was not a 5-star, Barton. I was not a 5-star. I was a 4-star recruit. And I think I was like a 3 to a 4. Like, I don't even know if they had me as a 4 until I got some bigger offers from schools like Notre Dame and Michigan.
All right, well, that was before my time, so you can't blame me. All right, that wasn't my fault. I think I saw on ESPN maybe you're 20th or something, so I was assuming there was a 5-star label on that one. But no, we'll have to circle back and rewatch the film to see if they got it wrong. But so let's start there, though. Let's start in the recruiting process. You're an Ohio kid, and you had an Ohio State offer, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And you ultimately landed at Notre Dame. Can you kind of take me back to that process and why you bucked the in-state Buckeyes and went to the Irish?
Yeah. So I'll kind of go back and just talk about how different it was back then too. Obviously, recruiting was different, where a lot of schools wanted you to go to their camp at least for a day. They wanted to see you in person and throw. And I wasn't a guy who went to a lot of Nike camps. There wasn't even an Under Armour camp back then, or Rivals camps. All these camps that you see and showcase the kids go to now, that just didn't exist. Nike had just started really coming out with theirs, and this is back in 2000, 2001. So in the Midwest, it was more about going to schools to get looked at and then having them see you throw in person. And so my mom and I basically followed Ted Ginn Sr., Ted Ginn Jr.'s dad.
Yeah.
He at the time was coaching for Cleveland Glenville, and we would basically follow. They had a bus because they had so many players that had played up there in Cleveland Glenville that would go around from Ohio State down through the South to Kentucky, Louisville, Tennessee, going down to South Carolina. At Florida, I saw some of those guys. So there was a bunch of different places that, my mom and I basically got in a car and drove and followed some of them. And then, we run into it at Michigan, Northwestern, some other places. So it was more of like a true recruiting tour where you were going out to each individual school and you were going out meeting the coaches, almost trying to picture like what it was going to be like if you were actually playing there. And so to come full circle, as far as my decision and not to go with Ohio State, I think one of the things that was concerning for me with Ohio State was just their track record at that point of sending quarterbacks to the NFL. In comparison to both Michigan and Notre Dame, those are both the schools that had already had a rich history of quarterbacks going to the NFL. From an educational standpoint, they both fit more what I was looking for as far as really, really high academic standards, but also a really, really high level of football. And I know Ohio State University has continued to improve that since then, but as far as what I was looking for, I think those two schools kind of fit the direction I was going. And I used to say to people back when they'd ask me that, because like, hey, you're a Columbus kid. How the heck did you get out of Columbus, not go to Ohio State? I said, name the best quarterback to ever play in the NFL from Ohio State.
It may change here soon, do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it will. I think obviously with a guy like Dwayne Haskins, that could be the case. Justin Fields in the future could be the case. But it's a hard question to answer.
Yeah.
You may have to go back to, a guy like not necessarily Joe Germain, maybe Bobby Hoying. You can go back through the years, but probably even back further than that. Art Schlichter this is the one that comes to mind to me. So in comparison to Michigan with Tom Brady or Notre Dame with Joe Montana and Joe Theismann and all these other quarterbacks, you didn't have that. So That factored into my mind, at least during the recruiting process. And that was like a question that I was always trying to answer in my mind.
So you get to Notre Dame and have a great career, and kind of the Notre Dame fans out there have a lot of snapshots sort of in their head of the Brady Quinn era. I'm curious, when you look back at your time there, and really I'm talking more on the field here, because I'm sure you got some great memories beyond it, but on the field, games, like, is there a moment that is the most ingrained in your mind from your time in South Bend?
Man, it's hard because I think in the beginning it was so tough. But when you did have some of those wins where no one thought you were going to win, right? My sophomore year, we had to go down to Knoxville, Tennessee for basically a night game. I think it was like a 4 or 5 p.m. kick, but it felt like it got dark there pretty quick, and it was as loud of an environment as I've ever been around. So to get out of there with a win, and I had an uncle who played ball at Kentucky, Steve Slates, and so that was a huge rivalry for him. And they drove down from Lexington, Kentucky to come watch that game, and just how excited he was, how excited we were. That was one that I'll never forget. Like, I'll never forget my center, John Sullivan, turned around at one point and kind of gave me a look. And then after that series, we went off on the sidelines. Like, I was like, what were you trying to say? He goes, the ball was moving. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, I swear to you, it was so loud. The ball was moving on the ground during third down. And literally, our tacklers couldn't hear anything I was saying. We tried to go silent count, but it was tough. I remember that win. That was a big one. Michigan that year, coming into Notre Dame after they crushed us the year before on game day. I want to say it was 38-0. And I think every single day in that offseason, one of our workouts was always 38 reps because of how bad that loss was. The entire offseason, there was something that was 38 reps. It could have been a leg press. It could have been a bench. It could have been sprints, whatever. So that one, to be able to come back and get a win over them at that point in time, which is an upset, that was pretty big. But, some of the other fun ones are kind of like, we were playing in Stanford. We knew at this point, my junior year in 2005, this is after the Bush push game, but we still had aspirations and hopes of going to a BCS game, which is a huge step from where we were, in Charlie Weiss's first year and what we were the year before. And I just remember kind of a 2-minute drive that ended up, I was going down, going ahead, getting the win. And just afterwards, like, seeing Charlie dancing in the locker room, how excited he was, how excited the team was. And Charlie wasn't the type of guy to really show that sort of emotion. And so to see him, like, dancing and just talking about, just going bowling and all that stuff. And really at that point, something that you became more aware of afterwards was that was an extra $15 million that Notre Dame was getting from that. So there was a lot of people who were excited about that drive and about that bowl berth after Stanford. And I mean, look, the Bush game was one that it obviously sticks out in your mind because of just everything that game was. The hype around it the week leading up to it with the pep rallies and the USC bus when they got there and all the thousands of fans that were there rocking their bus, and just the way the game went. Unfortunately for me, the toughest memory is being on the sidelines, being helpless and watching what transpired in those final moments. And I always go back to the play where we got to run basically what's called quarterback will. And we knew the whole week. Charlie told me during that week before this game, he said, hey, you're going to score the winning touchdown on this play. And so I want to say we might have been on the 5, and it was basically a draw, a little 3-step from under center. And we had our running back, Travis Thomas, who would lead up on the will, and I should have had a free release to it to get to the end zone. I think I just got around Keith Rivers to extend the ball across the goal line. Could have been short. I don't know. We didn't have replay back then. But I remember my first thought was, how much time is on the clock? Because I felt like if we left them too much time, like they were going to find a way to score. And obviously they ended up doing that.
Well, that it's interesting because you played against some great players. Obviously those USC guys is a great example of just a loaded roster that you had to sort of match sort of blow for blow with. But I'm curious whether it's college, NFL. I mean, that is always a question. I'm sure as much football as you played, I imagine you've gotten this question before, but I'm always curious who you think of when I ask the question, best player you ever played against. And you can take that any level that you played, but what comes to mind when I ask that kind of a question for you?
For me, it's just sheer dominance. Watching them on tape, like the week leading up to it and knowing that your scheme was going to you'd have to make an adjustment with your scheme every single play because of them, or they were going to alter like how you played the game.
Right.
So guys, that I can remember, especially early on in my career at Notre Dame, Matthias Kiwanuka. Yeah. He had, and this is interesting because when I was first being recruited at Notre Dame, Rex Hogan has now become an NFL scout. He had transitioned from Notre Dame to the NFL ranks at that time. I want to say maybe for the Bears, and we still kept in touch. And I didn't realize it at the moment because of this play in the game, but I remember dropping back, and I think Kiwanuka slanted back down inside. So he was going against one of our guards. It might have been Bob Morton at the time. And I just remember as I was dropping back, feeling his presence. And he's huge. He was like 6'6", 6'7", really long arms, really strong. And I just remember feeling him like basically from the snap of the football, almost like being in very, very close. As I was like looking downfield to the right, I could feel him here. And I think I ended up just like spinning out to the left and escaping and probably throwing the football away, but not really fully understanding what he did. He essentially took one arm and took our 300-pound guard and just threw him, like literally threw him as he slanted back down, one-arm throw. And after the game, Rex Hogan was saying to me, he goes, it was one of the most violent things I've ever seen at the college football level of like a man throwing another man. So he was one that, like, I remember when we went up against BC, we always were aware of, not just because of his ability to rush the passer, but his hands up too in the passing lanes. We had to try to cut him, do some things there. Darrelle Revis for Pitt. He had baited me. So opening game of the year is 2005. He really didn't play that much in 2004, right? He was a freshman that year. I think he played in like 3 games, but he was pretty good. I think he had a couple picks just in the 3 games he played. But it's opening game of the year. Dave Wannstedt now is the head coach there. And we heard some buzz, but we were more like HB Blades was the middle linebacker. Wannstedt was having him play that Zach Thomas scheme. And we knew about Revis, but not a ton. Because he wasn't that highly touted recruit either out of Aliquippa, right. I believe. So it gets to a point in the game where I think we're up maybe by a couple of scores. And we essentially ran a levels concept, right? So we had like a corner route, a little spot route, and then like a little flat, or like, a curl. So corner, curl, flat. And I kind of didn't have great vision off of the play action fake. And I initially was trying to move him to take the flat. And so I kind of turned my shoulders like I was going to go there. And then I tried to come back over top to throw, get him to bite on the flat and then throw to the curl. And I think he literally did exactly I did exactly what he wanted me to do. And I thought he was doing exactly what I wanted him to do. But once I lost vision of him, I thought when he had kind of moved his hips, he was going to take the flat, but he baited me. He took a couple steps and then he dropped and turned his hip and sprinted right back to the curl. And he ended up picking it off. And I remember after the fact seeing that and thinking, okay, like that was kind of a hell of a play, and just the way it had all worked out. He was definitely one of the better college players we'd ever played against.
You said that was his freshman or sophomore year?
That was his sophomore year, because I believe he was the 2004 class.
Yeah. So at that point,
was kind of his breakout season.
Yeah. So at that point, that was one of those plays where you were probably a little bit like, all right, this guy is about to be a guy everyone knows about.
I think afterwards watching it and then following him, because that was the opening game. And so, and then I think we had Michigan after that. So I couldn't focus too much, because then you had all you had to worry about, and Ryan Mundy and all these other Michigan players, right? Sean Crable, Prescott Burgess. So I kept track of him after that. And I was just like, all right, this kid's really going to be special. And so at the college level, there's just a number of guys. I mean, heck, dude, that Sugar Bowl my senior year, Glenn Dorsey, Tyson Jackson, who was their safety? His name's escaping me. Laron Landry. Like, those guys were studs. Like, watching their team speed. That Ohio State group we went up against in the Fiesta Bowl in 2005. I mean, we knew both those games, like, we were just outmatched to some degree as far as speed and athleticism. So we really had to be smart about what we did and the plays we ran with our audibles and our checks to ensure that we're getting the proper angles and we're not putting ourselves in bad matchup situations.
I was texting with you before, and you mentioned Ed Reed. And if you got an Ed Reed story, I got to pull it out of you, because as a former safety, that dude is like my that is how I dreamed I would be able to play, and you can't do it. And I'm just curious, what's your Ed Reed memories?
Yeah, so he's probably the scariest guy I think I ever had to play up against. When we were talking about like greatest of all times, like he's the greatest that I've ever had to go up against and just prepared for. And so, he like of the times that we played against the Ravens, I don't believe he intercepted me or picked me off. So the story I'll tell will be from a different one, but it'll be from a Derek Anderson interception. But so Rob Chudzinski was our offense coordinator my first 2 years in Cleveland. Rob had been at Miami with Ed, and Ken Dorsey was on our team as well in that quarterback room. And so Chud, that's what we called Rob Chudzinski for short, and Ken, were very familiar with Ed. And we had Kellen on our team, these other Miami guys. So these guys knew how Ed was. We would literally be game planning, and because they were a divisional opponent, we would be game planning and kind of preparing for like what or how this concept would change when we were playing against the Ravens for Ed. And just the way on film, how he would like crouch down and he would get in that little, he would be around the emblem and try to like blend in with the emblem in the middle of the field and disguise what he was doing. Right. And so I remember the first week preparing for him, my rookie year, we had shown some things earlier in the year on film, and we were literally basing a lot of our reads of regressions and how we're going to throw off of what we were anticipating Ed doing. So if we had shown, for example, like a post, like they called it your old NCAA concept, your post, your deep dig, you got a shallow cross, and you got a guy sitting over the ball, and then a flat control depending on the protection. And we were like, okay, like this time we're basically, instead of usually this post was like more of an alert, now we're going to read it off the middle field safety, because we know once Ed sees this shallow cross come across, he's going to go jump this in route. And so we were now reading off him to really throw potentially the post versus the dig. But so there was like things like that within the concept, right? Well, we had a 3-by-1 set, and he was on the opposite side of the field giving like a cover 2 shell. And over here we had, I want to say like, post out flat combinations, like another levels concept. Yeah. And so at the snap of the ball, I want to say he took like a couple steps, like he was going to be running to this half of the field. And then we had a deep dig on the backside, so that was taken away. And then he just sprinted, and he ran to go undercut on the sidelines, that deep, like a little bow route, sail route. And as DA, dropped back, I think he kind of was confirming it, saw it, and then just kind of turned and looked to throw, knowing that he was going to have potentially that deep sail route. Right. Ed was just able to pick it off on the sidelines. And I was just like, holy crap. Like that dude, there's no one like him. There was no one like him that played the safety position like Ed did, where like even in breakdowns preparing the week, we're like, what coverage is this? Well, we're not exactly sure because of the way Ed had played it.
That sounds a lot similar to this. One of those, I don't know if you saw an NFL Films clip recently where Bill Belichick told Ed Reed it was the best play he's ever seen. Something really similar to that, where he picked off Peyton Manning on a ball that they had been scheming all week, that Ed was going to do something totally different, and he was, like you said, scheming the opposite. And thank you, by the way, for dropping Rex Hogan's name, because that's one of the few NFL scouts that made it up to New Haven to see me. And yeah. So, that's one. He's one of the best, man. He's a grinder. Yeah. Like that's one of the reasons why. I mean, he's still doing it now. I want to say maybe for the Titans now, because I believe he might be in Nashville. At least last time I checked with him, he was. He was living in Nashville. I think he's up in Indianapolis now. I mean, I don't know if he's living in Indy, but he's in that department. Let's get into the draft. Speaking of, so as you approach this NFL draft, I think from the quarterback perspective, I'm curious your opinion on how these guys stack up. Obviously, Joe Burrow is sort of the premier guy coming out this class. I guess first of all, maybe how is your order of the quarterbacks, and do you feel like there is a tier between Burrow and the others? Is Tua in that tier as well? Kind of give me your lay of the land for the quarterback position this year. Yeah, so I'll put it this way. I mean, the way I rank them, and I can't include medical into it only because I'm not privy to that information. So right. I just base it on what I see on tape and how I feel like that game is going to translate to the NFL level. So with what Burrow did this past year, I mean, he's the number one in his class to me. I think besides the fact he just never had a bad game and the moxie and the swagger that which he plays, his control of the line of scrimmage for the most part, too, from what you saw, a lot of those intangibles you're looking for when you're seeing him kind of changing plays, going to the ball in the right spot with the right matchup, given what the defense is giving him. You can just tell he plays with a high football IQ. But the things I love is the fact that just his pocket movement. He's a good athlete. We see him scramble. We see him run to pick up, first downs.
but it's his movement in the pocket and throw and how accurate he is doing that. Because that's all objective for an NFL defense. It's get the quarterback off the spot. And if you can, reset off the spot and still deliver accurate footballs to the right spot, you're going to be really successful at the NFL. And so that one trait alone for Joe Burrow, to me, makes him the best in this class compared to the rest of the guys because of what he was able to showcase this year, arguably against maybe the toughest schedule too, when you take that into account. Tua is right up there. I think when you look at just his body of work, what he's done the entire time at Alabama, regardless of the talent around him and all that stuff, because you're gonna have everyone's like, oh, they've got NFL caliber receivers at Alabama. Well, in the NFL, you have NFL caliber receivers too at that organization. Like, I'm not sure people realize that. So I look at his release. I love how compact, quick it is. I love his ability to be able to create and buy time, make more plays while he still keeps his eyes downfield. When I talked to his offensive coordinator there for a year, Brian Daboll, who's now with the Bills, one of the things I asked him about was just his overall vision, how he sees the field, because there are some things where he'd be able to see kind of stuff on the backside. And I was like, is he freelancing there, or is that just like a special trait? And Daboll would always say, no, he's like, he has a really uncanny ability to kind of just feel open spaces and be able to find a way of delivering the ball in those spots. And so I would say Tua is next, but not knowing the medical, that could change as far as where he's drafted. That's where I feel like there's a next tier, because those guys were able to display, I think, the type of polishedness, readiness, the ability that you would see taken somewhere in the top 5 for both those guys based on the tape. With Herbert and Love, they're like the next tier in my mind. Herbert, I think, look, he's got a ton of physical tools and intangibles. He got better as he went on. I just keep watching him, though, and thinking, man, after 4 years of starting, you still feel like he's sometimes feeling out the process, like some things are mechanical for him, in particular when he plays in the pocket. If he's in a different system, would that change? Maybe. If you booted him out more, utilize his running ability more, maybe help him get into more of a flow, he would have more of what feels like a rhythm from the pocket. And I think the only other thing that really concerns me about his transition to the NFL is he's got a strong arm. That's great. But he has a hard time fitting balls into windows. So over the linebackers, but in front of the secondary players in those intermediate routes. And that's what the NFL forces you to do. The college game is a lot of around the line of scrimmage and then shots downfield. But the NFL game, they're not going to let you beat them deep all the time. And you can throw the screens, all stuff all you want. They'll give you that because they'll rally up and make those tackles in the open field. It's the intermediate routes, the ability to move the sticks, the ability to get 20-yard chunks. That's how you win football games. And that's what concerns me about Herbert is when he has to throw into windows, a lot of times when I'm watching him on film, he's got to wait. And the other thing is once he gets off his first progression, it concerns me how he gets to 2, 3, 4. With Love, I think the hardest thing for me was just when you look at the other 3 I mentioned, at critical points in games, they are good decision makers. Love, for whatever reason, and you can talk about the lack of talent around him this year, the coaching change or the scheme change. He made really poor decisions at points in games where he didn't. Maybe he felt like he had to, but even in taking that into account, they were just bad. It's not like even a calculated decision. Right. So that bothers me about him. But he looks more polished and has a better feel for, I think, the position than Justin Herbert does. He's got similar intangibles and athletic ability. The way he can throw from a little bit off balance, different platforms, that is different, I think, compared to Herbert. And look, his 2018 film was better than probably any year that Herbert had on film. So those are kind of my top 4. I've got Eason after that. Only 1 year starting, but strong arm. And I think he actually does find ways of using touch and fitting those throws in like Herbert didn't. But his ability to consistently compete versus pressure and complete balls, that concerns me a little bit. Sometimes you feel like he becomes a statue in the pocket after a first read's not being there. So he's kind of be 5. And then I've got Hurts as my 6. Like, I just think it's hard not to look at the way he's progressed combined with his athletic potential. And then the intangibles too, his leadership skills, everything else. Like, I think he's the type of guy that I want in my locker room, that I want on my team competing.
How about this? If you got a need at quarterback and you got to pick in the very back end of the first round, let's say the other 4 are off the board, is Eason worth a first round pick to you?
I think so because of the talent. I mean, look, you just can't teach that sort of arm strength. And yet at the same time, with the type of touch he demonstrates, like I go back to the Oregon-Washington game this year, and there's a couple of clips, and I remember I'd made this cut up. I think I might have made it for CBS Sports HQ. Just the differences between, that little, 18 to 20 yard over route and Herbert having a harder time being able to throw it where it gets over the shrilling defender, but before that middle field safety comes over and takes him away. And there was other examples of Eason fitting balls into those windows. And I kind of came away saying, like, that's the difference between these two as far as passers. I think Herbert's still a bit of a thrower where he lacks the ability to kind of shape throws. And Eason, on the other hand, he can sling it in there with the best of them, but he also can fit some balls in different windows. And so I think for that reason, like, he's got a lot of upside. And by the way, he's a better athlete than I would have given credit for being 6'6". Like, he moves better than I thought he was going to, watching the tape and watching him at the combine.
You played it, obviously. You know the difference between the college game and the NFL game. Jake Fromm basically beat out Eason at Georgia, and has had a pretty good career in his own right. Obviously, it's clear, it's evidence that one has the superior tools. Make a case for why Eason is a better pick or a higher on your board than a Fromm, and maybe just explain why Fromm wouldn't be above Eason in this sort of situation.
Yeah, I think it comes into the two things I'm talking about as far as watching tape and then looking at how their game translates. I think Jake Fromm's game, there's a lot of things to like about it. I mean, one, he's experienced. He makes good decisions when he's got the football. The completion percentage you can nitpick at this year, but he also is playing with the young group of receivers. So I think that plays a little bit of a factor into it. I don't see the arm strength, the ability to push the ball downfield like you need to. He's a guy that I think, he throws a great back shoulder. That's going to be, it's going to be utilized in the NFL. But the problem is, if I'm playing against Jake Fromm, if I'm looking at him as, a defensive coordinator, or defensive player, I am probably saying, I know he wants to throw the back shoulder because I don't think he can throw over top of me. So I'm going to go ahead and play at the low hip of the receiver and make him throw the football up over the top, 42.5 yards, 44 yards downfield, see if he can complete that football consistently. And I think he might struggle to be able to do that. I think you also have to take into account he had a tremendous running game, one of the better offensive lines in college football too, and also a great defense. And I know at times he had to kind of win and show up in some shootouts, but there are a little bit of concerns about not necessarily him being a game manager or anything like that, but just about, I think, his ability to truly be able to put a team on his shoulders and be able to go in there and win a game. And you could have the same questions about Jacob Eason, but the difference is, again, he's got that arm strength. Like, he's got that arm talent that, again, you can't teach that. And so I think for that reason, like, that might be one of the biggest reasons why I just think Eason's game could be translated easier to the NFL than what you're seeing from Jake Fromm, where if he goes to a team that puts him in a bad situation, in bad circumstance, he might have a hard time overcoming that compared to a Jacob Eason, who, if he's late on a read, he can make up for it with arm strength to fit the ball in there. Or if he scrambles out there and misses his read or something, but he can still make something happen and heave the football 70 yards downfield.
All right, last question for you here. Give me a case or give me a team, and I know you're probably a little bit in NFL mode right now, and so if you want to throw an NFL team in there as well, but do you have a college team or an NFL team that you're buying stock in for the 2020 season, a team that you are particularly excited about, that you think is going to maybe surprise some people with how good they're going to be in the fall?
I mean, besides the obvious cast of characters, right? So we can't include Clemson, can't include Bama, not going to include Ohio State. It's tough because I look at the Pac-12, like, I think USC is going to be better than people give them credit.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there.
Like, I think they're going to end up winning the Pac-12. I think, their schedule's tough, and so we'll see if that can keep them a part of the conversation for the playoff. But that's a team that I think everyone's down on because they're just, they want someone besides Clay Helton. But the bottom line is, like, Clay Helton's been pretty successful. Like, he's won a Rose Bowl, he's won a Pac-12. He's probably going to win another Pac-12. The dude had to play with a true freshman quarterback. That was their third or fourth string option going into the year. Like, come on, if you look at the results, like, it's not as bad as everyone kind of makes it out to be. And I think they kind of blame the recruiting on that. But I think there's some other things there too. So I think USC will be a lot better than people give them credit next year. The other team is like Penn State. Like, I'm kind of looking at Penn State of being like sneaky, more competitive too in the Big Ten. I know they lose some pieces on defense. I get it. Yatir Gross-Matos, Cam Brown, just to name a couple. But I think that's a team too that might surprise you a little bit too with how competitive they are in the Big Ten next year, and maybe they can pull off some upsets.
Awesome. Well, Brady, you've been very gracious with your time here. I appreciate you sitting down
Thanks,
with me.
man. I love talking with you. It's always good to be on with you, man.
Awesome. Well, thanks a bunch. Good luck the rest of the quarantine, buddy.
Thank you, you too.